Hi. So today we're going to start with part two of healing from emotional and verbal abuse. I'm continuing the healing points from how emotional and verbal abuse had affected me in childhood. And before we get started on this, I just want to say again that I'm very excited that this is helping. And I'll keep doing as long as there is a need or a desire to hear about it. So thank you very much. And so let's get started with some of part two of the healing. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was healing from people who would say one thing and do something else. I promise truthfulness, so I'm going to be truthful. That didn't come right away. That's something that didn't really show up until other healings had taken place. So that one came later on. I struggled with hypocrisy in others for a really long time, much longer than I care to admit, but I promise truthfulness, so I struggled with it for a long time, like up to like 5 years, long time. 5 years ago. It was the first time I started really dealing with that and intentionally dealing with it. So I would say some of the things that kind of happened to me before I could start dealing with that is that I had already started to become aware of who I was and was becoming at peace with my past mistakes, with things that I had done. I was starting to forgive myself, and I had started making goals, and I had started picking direction for who I wanted to be. And maybe later we'll talk more about this, but who I wanted to be, I sort of my desire, I lined it up with I wanted to give back what had been given to me, like the healing and the grace that had been given to me. So I really wanted to kind of, I don't know how to express this any other way, but I felt like I owed a debt of gratitude to the one who had brought me to this place. So for me, that was God. And I understand that God showed up through people also. But I also knew that the ultimate in all of this was God. So I wanted to just pay back humanity what had been paid to me. And that in no way, I know that maybe that sounds like I think I have more or something. I don't know what you're hearing from that, so I'm going to try to explain it for the best way that I know how. I know I'm not who I once was, and I know it's not a result of things that I did. Like, I know that I can't know what I don't know. And all this information had to come from somewhere, and somewhere along the way, I had to embrace it and believe it. It wasn't just hearing it, because people hear good advice all the time. They do nothing with it. So I know I had heard good advice, and I don't completely understand the process, but I want to be clear that in no way am I patting myself on the back, because I don't think it was me who did this. I really do think it was something outside of myself, and I believe that it was God. So, that's up to you to believe whatever you want to believe, but I have a proof of a changed life for me. And so I know the power of believing in something. So even if you think I'm believing in a fairy tale, I have to tell you that I still have proof of a changed life. So, I do have that, and I love it. And it revealed to me choice. I have the right to believe whatever I want to believe, and this is what I believe. And it has made a huge difference in my life. And that's verifiable. Like, you can ask my friends and family if you want to. like the FBI does when they're they're interviewing you. So if you want to like interview me, you can ask my friends and family. Um, so along that path, I started to realize, okay, now here's the really tough thing. Like along that path, as I was starting to heal, one of the things that first hit me was that I was also a hypocrite. Like I would say one thing and I would do something else. Even with good intention, like when I was saying it, I had good intention that I was going to do the other thing, but I didn't. So kind of just owning the reality that in some ways I was a hypocrite and sometimes I didn't have integrity in some of the ways that I lived. And that kind of led me down the path of forgiveness because I had to forgive myself for that. And then the weirdest thing happened. Like as I was receiving forgiveness and embracing the concept of grace and being at peace with myself, all of a sudden it became easy to give to other people because I was like, oh, I get it. And listen, this is coming from a person who's very aware of the mistakes that they made. And maybe you're of the belief structure that, you know, you shouldn't be forgiven for some things. And I mean, you are allowed to believe that. But my question to you would be, how's that working out for you? Like, what good comes from holding on to something? I mean, I don't know. It didn't work for me. I don't want to be hard on anybody, but I have to tell you, I mean, it just was not working for me to carry unforgiveness and to be angry at people all the time. I mean, I was the one suffering, especially when you can't help but read like scientific journals or even psychology or anything like that. You're reading these books that are telling you that if you're stressed, if you're angry, if you have all these problems mentally, that it was going to kill you physically also. Well, you can't have both. Like you can't feel like you should own all these emotions and not pay the consequence for it. And I was tired of paying the consequence. So I didn't do it anymore. Like I just decided to forgive. And I understand it's a process and it wasn't like immediately, but once I started feeling forgiven, I was like, well, I was like Oprah, you know, you get forgiveness and you get forgiveness and you get forgiveness, because why not? Because, I mean, it just makes the world a better place, I got to tell you. And so, where am I now? Because of my own shortcomings, or at the least the knowledge of those shortcomings, I understood that many times people were unaware of their own shortcomings. Like, I was aware that I had shortcomings. I just wasn't always aware of what those shortcomings were. That kind of happened over time. But when I started to understand that that was the reality of myself, it made it easier to make it the reality of other people. Listen, we all think we're right a lot of the time, and we ultimately end up finding out we're not, or maybe we handled something incorrectly or mean or whatever, because we do it out of fear, especially like right now on social media. People are kind of, you know, saying things that I don't think that that's really who they are most of the time. But right now, you know, we have a lot of fear. So fear is a powerful motivator. So we are motivated to respond out of fear. I mean, I did it. I get it. But it doesn't make it okay, but it does make it more understandable. And it's much easier for me to say, you know what, that's not the whole of who that person is. They're making them, it's just a thing, and they'll get through it. And if it took that much time, this is funny. And if it took that much time and discipline to change for myself, hello, I'm 48. I just told you this was like some sort of epiphany like 5 years ago. I was 43. And a lot of the people we're hard on are like teenagers or 20. So I got to tell you, if you're getting any good information in your 20s, I'm really impressed. So, if I understood how long it took for me, even the little bit of change that has happened, I'm not talking, I don't think that I just have it all together. But even out of the little bit, then I can give other people a break, because I didn't know and I don't know where people are in their journey. So it's okay to give them a break. Recognizing my own indictment in the process of healing, which is also called responsibility, which I know I sound like, a mom. Turns out I am one, but it's also called responsibility. But here is the amazing part of responsibility. It gave me freedom. Like, responsibility gives me freedom to change things in myself, because I think we all know this. We don't really apply it, but I think we know, at least I knew, and I still don't always apply it, is control. Like, we can't control other people, but we really do feel like we should. Or, we use shame or manipulation or all these different tactics to try to make people do what we want them to do. And usually the motivation is fear of punishment, fear of being hurt, fear, like some kind of fear. So I totally get that now. Well, I get it as far as I know, I get it to up till now. So now I don't really try to control other people as much. And I really am just working on me, because I'm the only one I have any power in. So I had to deal with allowing myself to say things out of anger, because I was angry, which required me having to take responsibility for my emotions, which was already a lot of the issue, right? I had to remember that if I wanted to not be affected by those around me, I had to make sure I knew what I believed and how I thought of certain things. And why is it okay for me to express myself in anger, but someone else isn't allowed to do it? Like, I had to face that stuff. And it is challenging. It's very difficult, but you really can't. Do you want, I don't know. I don't want to say it that way. I just didn't want to wait for other people to change for me to have the life that I wanted. Like, that's too much of a price for me to pay. And I think I said this last time. Everything costs something. You just have to decide what cost you're willing to pay. I didn't want to pay that cost anymore. I just found that I could not take care of dealing with my own stuff and deal with other people's stuff too. So moving on. Healing from constantly feeling that I had to prove myself came with time also. That also came with time. This was best learned when I understood and embraced who I wanted to prove myself to. That's the thing. A lot of times we try to prove ourselves to everyone, but what is the point of that? How do you know the person you're trying to prove yourself is not trying to prove themselves to someone else? Like, that's a never-ending cycle. I had never thought about that before then, so I spent my time proving myself to everyone, which I already said that. It can't work, because other people have problems too, like I said. If someone else even just had the same problems I did, then how are they expressing good information to me? So me proving something to them, like, why would their gauge be a good gauge? Sometimes it was just that my ideas and other people's ideas are just not compatible. Not even that anyone's necessarily wrong. We just think different, and that's okay. Like, there should be like some sort of connection between that, but we're not. I don't know. That's my desire, is to help people find a connection that, some people are weak in an area, other ones have strength in it, and maybe that would be helpful in humanity instead of putting everybody else down, which is how I used to do it. And just reminding you again, that did not work. I had to learn to let things go, which started with forgiveness. Here we are at forgiveness again. It will come up a lot, because it was one of the main things that I came back to a lot. Forgiveness is difficult, but it is the key. Hear me when I say it is the key to the lock of letting things go. Like, the key, it unlocks it so that you can let stuff go. But you have to learn to Sometimes we don't even know what forgiveness is. So I'm going to put up the definition of forgiveness and a little bit of information about it. And if you want to know more, just contact me through Facebook, Instagram, my email, whatever you want, and I will make sure you get the information on forgiveness. Now, mind you, forgiveness can be a process beyond just stating you have forgiven someone. Sometimes, I would even venture to say many times, people need to learn to keep a forgiveness mindset for a while because they have lived so unforgiving for such a long time. And that's not an indictment or a judgment or anything. It's just that if you live one way for long enough, you start to think you're right and you create a habit, and it's really hard to get out of. So it takes a little bit of time to get out of it. The next one was healing from rejection and abandonment. That has been a really long process. Even in places I didn't know it was affecting. Like it's big. Rejection is huge. Abandonment is huge. I just, sometimes it is so much bigger than I can even fathom because I think I know a lot about it and all of a sudden this whole other thing gets revealed. For example, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was healed from rejection through prayer, and I had no idea I was even suffering from it. Like, I didn't even know I was suffering from rejection and abandonment, much like anxiety. I had no idea. I was healed from rejection through prayer, and I had no idea I was even suffering about it. I already said that. About a week after I was healed, I noticed some amazing changes. Like, I stopped kind of caring what people thought, especially when they were disappointed or manipulative. Like, I just stopped caring because now I had a different perspective of what I considered to be important. Now, I am not saying that what other people consider important should not or could not be important to me. That would be ridiculous to say. But I am saying that most of those decisions of making things important in my life is better made from a vision or an idea of what I actually considered important instead of making everyone's opinion important. So what I had to do is I had to be intentional about what I considered to be important. And if I started to veer away from it, I had to visit that. Like, was this really important to me, or is this really important to me? And why do I think one's right or wrong? I really had, I'm trying to tell you, this whole process takes discipline and it takes time, but it can be done. So I had to know what I considered to be important, and there are some things in my life that you have to let go of in order to make the things that you think are important. You have to make them. You have to kind of let go of other stuff to make that always more the more important thing. So paying forward healing, for example, like what's happening here, what we're doing here. I don't like to do this, and I don't really like to share my emotions, and I don't really like to be on video, because I'm telling you, everything is wrong with me. And I don't really like doing any of these things, but I said that my goal is to help others and help other people pay healing forward or pay healing forward. Well, I can't do both. Like, I can't say one thing and do something else. If this is something that's going to help people, I have to keep trying new things. I have to do whatever. And I say have to because it's the goal I made. No one else is making me do this. I just believe that it's something that's important to others. And it doesn't have to be important to everybody. To me, it only needs to be important to 1 or 2 people. So if 1 or 2 people get something out of it, that's humanity to me. It doesn't have to be everybody. My ultimate goal is not popularity. My ultimate goal is not, money or whatever. So you hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying that doesn't cross my mind. I'm saying I have to keep making it that. Even when it's difficult, and even when it's weird, and even when I don't feel like doing it, I keep making what I said was important the important thing. Um, and because, again, you have no idea where other people are coming from, bottom line, get healthy. You can usually recognize healthy. So being healed from acting out came from allowing myself planned times of acting out. This one was kind of a easier one. And it was not really something that came right away. It was over time I kind of started to figure this one out and just practice different thing. And this is the one that worked for me. So not really the kind of acting out that I had no control over, but the kind that I knew were healthy ways of releasing, like frustrations or disappointments or anxiousness or sadness, etc., things like that. Over time, I began to plan things to prepare. Oh, this was the other thing. Over time, I began to plan things to prepare for a better standard of living. So, like, I started doing things from a proactive perspective instead of a reactionary one. So it wasn't like I was just trying to cope while I was in it. The more you do that, the more you start to realize maybe there's ways of preventing this anxiousness, like maybe saving money. It would help me in some ways of feeling anxious all the time. Maybe, and that's not, I'm not being dismissive. I'm talking about my own thing. Like I spent more than I was saving, but that's just my story. Or praying, instead of praying reactionary, praying ahead of time, like, Lord, just help me have peace today or something like that. Or meditate on something that creates a better mindset, or get more sleep. So that was one for me. And what's another one I did? I did do more sleep, but I also did things like I started to be more careful about what, like I mentioned, about what I watched and what I was listening to and things like that. And it's its own level of discipline. Like this part in and of itself is its own level of discipline. So taking breaks, I was careful about that. I started relaxing when I could instead of complaining that it wasn't happening when I wanted it to. That was a funny one. Like I would complain I never got breaks, but when I had breaks, I didn't really spend it taking a break. And I think I said this, but that was hard because I was very used to doing things on my own schedule, which was usually based on how I felt, which, going back, we couldn't always trust what I was feeling. Most of the time we couldn't. So it was never in preparation for how I would feel, or maybe even helping reduce the effect of the feelings themselves. So on that note, I'm going to stop there because now this one's even longer than the last one. And I'm going to ask you to share. Please share. Tell me about your stories of forgiveness, how that affected you, or tell me how you coped with or have even healed from levels of anxiety. It looks like we're going to have a third part. So look for that to come out on Monday. And then we will be moving into spiritual abuse, which nowadays or back in the day, what it used to be called was religion. So we're going to talk about that. And as promised, I will continue to discuss how healing took place and what I still struggle with. And I will continue to be open and as honest as possible to share in this process of healing. Thank you for listening and helping me and others pay it forward. Thank you.